Hello guys, this is Mike from McProgramming.org. Today I'm going to talk to you about checked versus unchecked exceptions. And I'm going to start off by just giving you a search for Java exception. And you should go to a site that says docs.oracle.com, and inside here is it's called the Java API, and it's a library that holds every single object defined by Java and the methods, the hierarchy, everything that you need to know. So the class exception comes from the object as a superclass, which is a superclass of everything, and then it comes down to this class called throwable, and then exception. And inside here is a bunch of exceptions that are these are checked exceptions, and these are the exceptions that if you write a method, it won't compile, or a program, it won't compile until you either put a try catch around a certain thing or do a throws declaration in the method. And those terminology might make more sense in the next few tutorials, but an unchecked exception is ones that are very common, and those are the ones you're going to get at the bottom of the screen when you run a code. Common ones are null pointer exception and array index out of bounds exception. Things like those are very common for beginners. And here's a little description right here. It says the class exception and any subclasses that are not also subclasses of runtime exception are checked exceptions. So here's all of the classes that are checked exceptions, and if you go down farther you can read about each one of them and when it's used, or when it's thrown rather. Let's see what a runtime exception is, and that comes from exception class. So these are the ones. Let's say runtime exception is the superclass of those exceptions that can be thrown during the normal operation of the Java virtual machine. Runtime exception and its subclasses are unchecked exceptions. So these are things that can happen at compile time. Uh, you can't really anticipate it. Sometimes the user might give you, you're looking for the user to input a integer and they put in a string. It's going to throw an exception, and that's something you may not have been able. You could have handled it, but it's a lot of code to prevent that type of stuff if you didn't think of it beforehand. And there will always be something a user will do with the program that you didn't even think about covering. So let's show you some examples of what each one does. Right here I have a simple int x equals 6. So I'm going to print out what happens if we divide x by 0. And down here it says exception and thread main thrown. So java.lang.arithmetic exception, and it says that you divided by 0, and it tells you what class, what method, and 6 what line it was thrown at. So it was thrown right here, and that is an unchecked exception, because you could have wrote your own exception to check whether an input or something was 0, but a lot of times you can't. But let me give you an example of a checked exception. And Eclipse is great for this because if you're writing in Notepad++ or something, you might get lazy and just write out a little piece of code that requires some exception to be handled. And what Eclipse does is it gives you a red underline, and with that it lets you know that this needs to be handled, so you don't have to go code up a bunch of code in Notepad++ or whatever text editor you're using and compile it and be like, oh, I forgot to put it in a try catch or something. So let me let's see. IO exceptions usually have to have try catch. Let me think of something. Let's just say string file name equals driver.txt. I'm going to make this up, I'm not going to actually run it. And it's going to be a file called file equals new file, and then its parameters it takes in a string, so we're going to give it file name. File name consists of this text file. And now let me import that real quick. Now we're going to create a scanner object of input, and we're going to say new scanner, and it's going to take in a file that it's going to scan. So let's import that real quick. And right here you get this whole bit of code underlined. It says unhandled exception, type file not found exception. So the reason that they want you to throw this or surround it with a try catch means that if you ran this code, maybe it can't find this file, so it's already setting you up to handle that situation. And a lot of times with these, I just do a try catch block, and I'll explain that more in detail when it comes to that video, which will be maybe like 2 videos ahead of this one. And pretty much what it's going to do is it's going to try to run the code right here, and if it fails, it will catch this exception, and you could just do a simple, you know, sysout file not found. Okay, let's run this code because this file doesn't even exist, so it should print that to the screen. That's a lot prettier than your program completely shutting off and having all that red code down there. So that's the difference. Is an unchecked exception you're not always in control of, and you can write specific exceptions yourself to handle them, but a lot of times it's done at compile time and the program might just shut off because it had a fatal exception. So an unchecked exception, are ones that must be handled with this try catch before you can even compile it. And let me show you what I could. My other option was to throw it to the method. Let's see what happens if I run it now. See, it'll throw the exception down here. That's why I like using the try catch, is because you can handle it however you want. This one will just throw it through this method, but we'll get into what throws means and get a little bit more specific. So thank you for watching, and please subscribe and continue to watch these tutorials.